evening, everybody, and welcome to the This is Ibrox flagship Sunday night bulletin. I'm tonight's host, Adam Robertson. This podcast is brought to you in association with Zenith Coins. They're giving every Rangers fan a chance to own their memorable collection of 5 wonderfully crafted coins. There's one for the founding fathers, one for Ibrox Stadium, another celebrating the famous European Cup Winners' Cup winning squad of 1972, the 9-in-a-row team, and the 55th league title win under Steven Gerrard. Head over to zenithcoins.com. They're an absolutely fantastic collection and would make a great gift for any Rangers fan. I'm joined tonight by Crawford and Tommy this evening. We're going to dissect yesterday's incredibly disappointing and frustrating 4-0 loss in the Old Firm. Crawford, before we turn to the game itself, now that you've had a bit of time to reflect, what's your overriding thoughts following on from yesterday's defeat?
Just disappointment in how they went about it. They weren't prepared at all, even though they should have been. Everybody knew. If you talk to anybody, everybody knew that's how the game was going to go in the first 30 minutes, and just never turned up, weren't switched on, and just a feeling of disappointment. And yesterday it was anger, but that's kind of subsided now, and just disappointment. But we just need to move on from it.
Mm-hmm. Tommy, before I come to you, I just want to read out a stat. So Rangers have played 13 away league games in 2022. I imagine quite a few people have seen this. So they've won 6, drawn 5, and lost twice. I would suggest that a lot of the wins were very much a case of result over performance. We've seen that at Livingston a couple of weeks ago. Maybe we didn't quite expect the result to happen in the manner that it did yesterday, but were you hugely surprised given that slightly worrying pattern away from home in the league?
Wasn't overly surprised by the results in terms of, I thought it was going to be a tough game. Celtic are a good side and they play in a particular style that Ange Postecoglou has got them playing, and Ange Postecoglou is a good manager. He's created a good side. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Particularly in the forward, middle to front, they're particularly good, although we didn't trouble them enough on Saturday to test that back line, it has to be said. We'll come to that later. But yeah, I mean, the signs have been there to some extent, glossed over by a really, really good start to the season in terms of European qualifications for the UCL. But yeah, it was always going to be very, very tough. We hoped that the players would step forward with something and show us something they haven't really domestically. I think it's fair to say under Gio, Cup, Scottish Cup aside maybe. I didn't expect the result, as in the number, or indeed the capitulative manner of it. And then you could delve into, I won't drain it here because we've got a long podcast ahead of us, but you could look at the individuals who just absolutely didn't turn up, and then the individual errors that lead to the goals, and you're particularly thinking number 4 there. So yeah, the short answer is I expect it to be a really tough game, and I wasn't overly confident that we would come away with the win. Did I expect to see the type of performance that led to our defeat? I absolutely did not.
Okay, well, for everyone that's going to put comments in, good evening to everyone. We're going to dissect the game first before kind of moving on to sort of bigger talking points and the potential ramifications of the results. So first goal comes about 8 minutes in, really didn't get off to a good start. Rangers concede a throw-in, Celtic switch on quickly, O'Reilly gets it across the box and Abada slots it home. Crawford, we had one of the first comments that came in there saying, how can they not be up for that game? And I think the most worrying aspect of this goal for me, we'll come on to McLaughlin in a second, is the reaction to the throw-in, and it just showed so quickly early on that they really went at it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think under Gerrard we implemented that, is it called multi-ball, where the whole ball will throw the ball in really quick. So our players did that under Gerrard, and it's part of the modern game. And again, it's just come down to your preparation for the match. I mean, you could watch every single Celtic game they've played this year, and that's how they play. It's get the ball in, press teams. They want the game over and done with in the first 20, 30 minutes. That is how they're going to come out and do it. We had to get through that period. We never. But the first goal, if you watch their game against Dundee United, it's like a carbon copy. They cross the ball in, Abada comes in, off the blind side. I mean, how many goals have we conceded from them that way? And we just don't seem to learn the lesson. And that first goal was a sickener for me, because it's just like, I just felt as if it was going to be the February game playing out all over again, and it was. It's a shocking goal, and there's no excuse for not being switched on and knowing that that's how they're going to play. Gio probably told them before the game, they probably drilled into them, and they've just out and not done it.
Yeah. Crawford, I'm going to stick with you just for a minute there while you were talking about not being switched on. Is that those kind of street smarts, for lack of a better phrase. Is it surprising that Rangers didn't implement that yesterday, because it's such a crucial way that you have to play away from home and indeed at home in Europe, and we've seen Rangers do that so successfully over the past few months? So was there any kind of surprise in there that at moments like that they were doing things like that?
Yeah, it's a surprise, because you go away to PSV Eindhoven and you're switched on the full match. You come away with a 1-0 that probably not many of us expected. So the players can do it. I mean, we've seen them do it numerous times. So there was absolutely no excuse for not being switched on and ready for that and being prepared. It's lost to me how they put that performance in yesterday, and that lack of preparedness going into the game. I mean, I'm pretty sure Gio is meticulous with his tactics. I'm pretty sure he'd warned them of what was going to come, and when the players crossed the white line, they just never carried it out.
Yeah, we had a comment come in there asking about McLaughlin, about whether he'll be dropped by Gio or not. We are going to come on to that a little later, but just focusing in on the first goal, Tommy, it wasn't a great day all round for John McLaughlin. What did you make of this first one in terms of, should he be doing better? Is there a lot of power on the shot? Where did you stand on this one?
Well, I think Crawford's, drained quite rightly a lot of the build up to it, and the lack of awareness, being streetwise, switched on, whatever phrase that anybody wants to use tonight to kind of reference the fact that the players weren't at it from the first whistle. Ball goes at the box. I do think McLaughlin should do better. He gets roughly a full hand to it. It trickles in under him. He's also slightly unsighted because he's got a defender in front of him as well, and it's not exactly like 20 yards out or something like this. It is fairly close to him. But yeah, you're looking, your keeper gets that level of touch to it. You are looking for him to save it. I think I wouldn't be overly harsh though with the first one. I think there's a tendency as we look back on what is a poor performance all round for the keeper. And he is exposed, by the way, but by the defence. And you look at the fourth goal as well, you start to look back and you go, well, he had a terrible game. And I'm not saying he didn't have a terrible game, but you then start to immediately think, right, well, he must have been culpable for every single goal.
Yeah, blows things out of proportion slightly, yeah.
Yeah, you start to poison the well a little bit when you look over your shoulder, knowing the result type of thing. And so do I think that was the worst one? Well, no, because you've got number 4 to talk about. But I think there's maybe some circumstances we see where the keeper's slightly unsighted, it's quite close range. Do I think he should save it though? Get to the point, Tommy. Yes, I think he should save it.
Yeah. I want to just stick with you for a sec there, Tommy, and ask, even just based on those first 8 minutes, because teams can have poor starts, it can happen, but did you think that Rangers would get back into it at that point? Because I think a lot of us had a kind of sinking feeling the way that Celtic had started, that things were only going to get worse, which they ultimately did. Did you at the time think we're going to struggle to get back into this?
I could hang myself. I could be disingenuous here and say, no, I didn't. I knew what was coming. I actually did think we would maybe crawl ourselves back into it or climb back into it. I mean, what was disappointing is everybody, and we should go back to the being prepared by the management team versus the players carrying out the instructions on the park, and the difference between that and philosophy of play at some point in this podcast, right? But everybody knows how Celtic are going to play, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but they play in a certain style, a certain manner. That's their go-to, right? And they do it very, very well. We've referenced that. You also know what they're going to start like. It's really fast, it's really direct, it's high pressing. And they also wanted to nullify our fullbacks as well, which they did extremely well. You don't want to give them the first goal. We did that, but then I thought, listen, we're not a million miles away, and we do have the cup game to reference as well. We know we could go toe-to-toe with them. I know the teams have changed slightly since that as well. We've lost Bassey and Aribo, etc. They brought in some other players. But I thought, listen, if we just weather the storm and we make sure we don't concede a second, then we'll have a chance to get back into this. And then slowly but surely you could see that every Rangers player was not at it. And I am genuinely struggle to think of any Rangers player that I give pass marks to, any, in the team. And then all of a sudden you find yourself absolutely blown out the water again at 3-0 at half time. So I did think we would get back into it, and then I swiftly thought better of it. Yeah,
your point there on management versus play is an interesting one, and we have had a comment come in there about how Gio was going pretty crazy on the touchline. I think it was for the second goal, while there was quite a few players sleeping. Again, we'll just dissect some more of the game first. Crawford, after that first goal, I thought Rangers did come back into it a little, and the big chance came the way of Antonio Čolak, following a pretty great cross from Borna Barisic. With the form that Čolak was in, he really probably should have buried it, shouldn't he? I mean, he spent a lot of the game isolated, and Tommy is right, no one is immune from criticism, Čolak included, but I was really surprised he didn't bury that. Were you as well?
Yeah, it was a good chance. He was get it on target. And Borna put in a couple of good crosses yesterday, but that was a great chance. And if you score there, you know, it probably could have changed the dynamic of the game. But I felt Celtic play that way, and you know they'll try and pounce on any mistake in your back line. But if there's a team, and Boyd said it yesterday, you just go long, get over the press, look for. I mean, Čolak's a big guy. Try and get into him to hold up and get up there and support him. If you can't pass around them, then there's nothing wrong with going long. Just play over them, because they play so far up, they suffocate you. You can't get out, and then it's one mistake and they're right on top of you. And I felt we didn't do it enough yesterday. I think we tried to pass out of it, and we just kept getting caught. And I mean, if you're talking about Čolak's chance, it's been clinical as well. If you look at the stats, Celtic had 6 attempts on target, 4 goals.
Yeah,
that's clinical. I mean, that you can work out the percentage, but I think us as well. We had I can't remember how many it was, maybe 4. You don't get anything from them, so you've got to take your chances.
Yeah. Well, things sadly only got worse from there. Celtic slightly later on in the half take a quick free kick. It goes through to Jota, who chips it over McLaughlin. Grover, I'll stick with you on, because Tommy kind of brought this up a minute ago. Again, what was worrying was the reaction. And as much as we like to talk about tactics, and they did undoubtedly play a part yesterday, so much of yesterday, and we've had a lot of comments about this, it was just really failing at the basics. And so we've seen Gio's reaction on the sidelines, etc. Who do you feel is more to blame in that essence? Because there's no way that Van Bronckhorst he's not telling them to not react there, right? So that I don't feel personally that that's a managerial error. Although yes, he did make errors. We can come on to the team, etc. I don't feel that was all down to him yesterday, or certainly wasn't.
No, I don't think it's all down to Gio. I think that particular goal, the 3 of them are all stood there. Don't even know what they're doing, and you can see O'Reilly just moves into the space. Not one of them realises he's there. Kent mucks about with the ball when he probably could have stood over it and let the team get back into some sort of formation and shape. It doesn't do that. It gives them the ball. Celtic play it quick, and that's why Van Bronckhorst is going crazy, because there was no street smarts, game management, whatever you want to call it, from the 3 players. It was so naive. Kent rolling the ball back. The 3 of them are sitting there switching off. I don't know what they were doing, talking to each other. Riley's just thought, there's the space. I'll go in there. Bang, bang, goal. So it was the players more than Gio for that one. It was shocking.
Yeah, those thoughts are echoed there by one of the comments we had come in, which was saying that it comes down to the players' domestic mentality. It's poor. It's on the players, and that we still would have the same players regardless of who was in charge. Tommy, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a fairly wide-ranging question, that, so I'll do my best to chop it up a little bit.
In terms of that side of things yesterday, who do you feel from that point of view has to take responsibility more? Do you think that ultimately it wouldn't have really mattered who was in charge yesterday? If the players aren't going to do the basics, how much does the manager to blame for that?
Well, that's my point about it being slightly wide-ranging in terms of there's no way, shape or form. It depends what road you want to take, right? So Van Bronckhorst tends to play a slightly defensive, catch-all. That's his philosophy, if you like. Dominate the ball, try and catch teams relatively on the break. Broad brush there, right? Broad brush. Now, that works in Europe particularly well for us. Won't work particularly well in Scotland, where they're up against Celtic or some of the more defensive sides. So, by and large, that the team's told that. So you're asking yourself, does that affect the philosophy about everything? Because they're always thinking reflectively on it and thinking about the defensive part of it. If that's the case, that still doesn't get them out of the fact that it's the basic to make sure you are blocking stuff. You're switched on. I remember there was a video of the Old Firm game where Bassey goes to talk to a Celtic player. Couldn't tell you who it was, right? They were lying in a heap. And Lundstrom is right on him. Get back into your shape. Don't go and pat him on and see if he's okay. Now, it's Lundstrom who's in that clip for the second goal, who's not switched on as well. And you think that's just a lapse. And the only person who can take accountability and responsibility for that is the individual player, because the manager can do nothing unless somebody shows me that Gio or a member of his management team is saying, "Oh, by the way, don't be too switched on," or
just
take your time round about this stuff.
Exactly.
It won't have happened. Then it only leads you to one thing. And I know we're all in a football kind of culture where everybody immediately goes to the manager and says it must be their fault. But manager's a human being, the coaching staff are human beings, the players are human beings. And if the manager's not playing, what other responsibility can they take other than to say, here's the shape, I pick that, I pick the team, I pick the instructions of how we're going to play. Individual stuff like staying tight to your man, making sure you're switched on, covering the basics. These are why these are professional players. So that's a roundabout way of saying everybody in a blue jersey has to take individual responsibility for the calamity that was Saturday.
Crawford, just coming back to the second goal there, I'm wary of giving McLaughlin an incredibly hard time, but ultimately I do think that he arguably could have done better with all 4 goals yesterday. I read a stat that the XG on Jota's attempt at goal was 0.07. Listen, there's nothing wrong with saying that it was a good finish. What did you think of McLaughlin there? Could he have done better? Should he have done better?
Yeah, should have. I think he's made Jota's mind up for him. I think I agree with you. I think in all 4 goals he could have done better.
Yeah. What specifically about the second goal do you feel he's rushed out? Is that what you think has kind of caused the issue in the second goal?
I think he's rushed out. I think and his angles are wrong as well. It's a good finish, and it's composure to do that. But I think he's made his mind up for him. So yeah, I think he's at fault for that one. But it goes back to, we probably all have agreements and disagreements over this, but I think we had to invest in a keeper. I think McLaughlin's a good keeper, but I think he's a number 2. I don't think he's a number 1. I think McGregor last season should have been his last. I think we should have invested in a really good keeper and spent the money. But time will tell whether that's proven to be the wrong decision by Gio, but I think it will be.
Yeah. Tommy, you were kind of nodding along there as Crawford was speaking. Would you echo what he said about McLaughlin's error there?
I was also having a conversation in my mind as well about some of those. I do agree with Crawford. I do think he makes Jota's mind up, and I would go beyond good. It's a really good finish from Jota, right? Who did look like a really good player on the day, and from what I've seen of him, does look like a really good player, a good find by Celtic. But Tav doesn't track the run either, and it's so you've got again. I come back to the word calamity or a succession of errors, whatever word you want to throw at it. You've got players switching off for the free kick. And I think there's 3 players round that ball.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
just
before we came on.
3 players taken out of the game straight away by a simple ball. Gio's going crazy on the touchline, obviously, as you've referenced there. And then decent ball. It's not an amazing ball. It's a decent ball through. Tav doesn't track the run. I think Goldson is caught on the blind side because he doesn't square his shoulders off to see the man coming in behind him. It's a decent take by Jota. Goes out wide, and then if McLaughlin doesn't come all the way out there, then Jota's probably going to turn on that and try and find somebody else. But he does make his mind up, and then it's a lovely finish. But yeah, every single goal, you're thinking, starts with a basic error, leads to something vitally important. That's the story of that game. Rangers basic snap errors leading to, right, you're not getting back into this game and you're losing the points.
Crawford, I'm going to try and play devil's advocate slightly here, and I want to, just because Tommy mentioned that Tav hasn't tracked the run there. Do you think some of the reaction or any of the reaction to McLaughlin yesterday, we've not come on to the 4th goal yet, and there is no excuse in that, but I do think that it can be common sometimes when keepers make errors, it gets lost that the build up to the goal was also quite poor. I think we do see that happen. Do you think there's any of that from McLaughlin yesterday, or do you really think that ultimately that's what he's there to do? Defenders are not going to track runs sometimes, and he has to step up? Or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, no, the responsibility for the goals lies with everyone. The 4th goal is probably the only one you can say that is solely McLaughlin's fault. Terrible pass out, but other goals, it's as Tommy said, it's a calamity of errors from the whole team. However, McLaughlin is your last line, and you would expect at that level your goalkeeper to at least save 1 or 2 of them. But every single one I thought he was poor on. And yeah, and years go by, we've always had a goalkeeper where even if the defence does get breached, you're thinking, well, he could pull off a save here, McGregor, Gorham, Kloss, whoever. I don't feel that way with McLaughlin. I feel when a team does get in, you're thinking, well, it's, I'm expecting a goal. I'm not expecting to pull off a great save like I did when it was McGregor or whoever else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, he has, as you kind of mentioned there is the weight of the Rangers goalkeeping jersey there. Tommy, let's just quickly pick up on the third goal, because it's kind of getting much of the same at this point for Rangers. It's fired in by Abada after O'Reilly drills the ball across the box. Crawford kind of referenced this earlier. I don't know how many times we're going to suffer from Abada just sort of peeling away and finding a little bit of space. What did you make of this one in terms of who was at fault and where things went wrong?
Well, again, you're looking at the consistent things we've spoken about here, which is people switch off, similar ball into the box, somebody peels off their man, so you're looking at your fullback to tuck in there slightly. You're looking at your centre backs to be a little bit more switched on. And I said I didn't give anybody any pass marks. I thought James Sands was okay, actually, but okay in italics, right? That's probably as nice as I can beat anybody. Exactly. And then I think maybe with that one, that's probably the only one that I might give McLaughlin a little bit of a
I had that down as maybe the one I was a little bit of the first three.
Yeah, you maybe save that, you maybe don't. I think that's if he gets to that, it's probably because Abada's hit it right at him. Whereas he is actually quite a cool finish. So I'm not going to be overly harsh on that particular one. I'm going to be slightly harsh on the fullback not tucking in. So I think Barisic has to do better there and come across as well. So yeah, ultimately it's the same thing. It's a catalogue of things. And how many goals have we lost against Celtic recently where somebody, and it is Abada generally, peels off and finds space, coming in front of the fullback. Again, simple things. You know what's going to happen. I would be stunned if Gio and his team didn't go through the fact that Jota and Abada like to peel off, and they like to break the lines, and they like to make really good diagonal runs as well. And particularly Abada's referencing here, peels off the fullback, does it again. Stunned if that's not been part of the makeup of the briefing before the match and things we've worked on. And then it's put into practice, back to the players again. Yeah.
Crawford, now that we've reached half-time, let's take a little step back from dissecting the game. And admittedly, there wasn't a huge amount happen in the second half. It happened in the second half, apart from the fourth goal. Scott Wright comes on for Glenn Kamara. We have talked a little bit there about how, as Tommy said, no one is telling the players to not switch on at certain points. But do you think that was maybe an admission on his part that he'd perhaps picked the wrong team? We have had a comment, I think it was actually one of our own that kind of put in a comment saying they weren't really keen on Kamara and that number 10. Do you think he has just got that wrong and he's admitted that with that substitution?
Yeah. I mean, he's got it wrong every single time he's played Kamara in number 10. I think there's only one game, Leipzig. That's worked out. Every other time he's totally ineffective in there. And the boy Tillman, he's played in that position. He's looked superb. And then yesterday he starts him out right. And it's not a surprise that Tillman was non-existent for the whole game. So he did get it wrong, and I think he realised at half-time he got it wrong, and he changed it. It was slightly better in the second half. It was just kind of falling apart in the last one, the 3-0 game, where Rangers were out and, damage limitation, and you don't know how much Celtic have took their foot off the gas because they realise the game's won and they've got Real Madrid coming up. So you've got to take all that into consideration, but he 100% got that wrong with Kamara, and I thought it at the start of the game. I seen the team, and I was like, he's playing Tillman out in the right, Kamara in there, and Kamara does not. He's a defensive midfielder. He gets about. He can position himself well, break up attacks. He's not the type of player that's going to receive the ball, play a killer pass, shoot, because he's got a terrible shot on him. So why persist in playing him in there? I just don't get it.
Yeah. Tommy, I think it's an interesting one, and I have to say, Crawford, I do agree with you, but at the same time, I look at all the tactical decisions that Van Bronckhorst has made since arriving at Rangers, and so many of them, again, some of the, some really, really top teams have been spot on. What is it about Kamara and that number 10 role that he thinks he wants to insist on? Do you think there's almost a level of stubbornness there where he sees it and he knows it maybe in training, and he wants to just really try and get it? I mean, where do you stand on Kamara playing as the number 10? It certainly amongst the fans doesn't seem to go down too well, as Crawford's alluded to there.
He's not number 10. So it's by and large, and that's not to be flippant with your question, but he's not a number 10. What you're looking for from your number 10 is somebody who can score goals, to to reference Crawford there, Kamara's not a known goal scorer. If he adds that to his game, he will go to a really, really, really big league. But he was only in there as well because of, I know he's been played a few times, but he's not the natural pick. If Lawrence is fit, Lawrence plays. The question here is, do you put Arfield in there inside? Do you bring Tillman back inside from the start as well? But they were trying to cover something out there on the right, which maybe leads to a wider point that we might touch on in terms of we've been crying out for a natural right winger for some time, and we haven't actually, we're forcing Tillman out there. But yeah, I do think that was a selection problem that was maybe forced onto you as well by Lawrence being injured. Could he have done something different? Yeah, he could have. And that didn't work. It just didn't work. The only thing I can maybe think of is he likes the fact that Kamara can, by and large, work the space really well in front of the box, and he can move the ball in tight areas, and he's got a pretty decent engine as well. The question would be, if you've got a defensive midfielder like that, or a holding midfielder, or whatever, could you have maybe went with Lundstrom playing further forward and switched Kamara back? I think that might have been the way that I would have looked at that. Or indeed if you'd have went with Arfield to start as well. But ultimately, yeah, the end point is Kamara in that position. Kamara anywhere further forward than the halfway line tends to not be amazing. By and large, he's functionally moving the ball. He's not going to break through the lines with a pass. He's not going to beat multiple people. He's not going to score a goal. It's just not like a killer. So yeah, it didn't work, and it had to get changed at halftime.
Yeah. Crawford, let's just quickly talk about the second half. I mean, as I said earlier, there wasn't really a huge amount of action. Let's just look at the fourth goal. It's probably not a lot to say here either. I mean, there's no excusing in it, is it? It's just a lack of concentration. It's a poor pass, and it's, Celtic were clinical, weren't they?
Yeah, it's just this modern day obsession with passing out from the back. And you do it and it works great. You beat the press, but there's a time and a place, and the pass was never on. Celtic just gobbled it up, easy finish, just shocking all round.
Tommy, again, I think this goes back to your point on tactical philosophy versus, kind of individual players, and again, to try and play devil's advocate slightly, are we just going to have to accept perhaps that if Van Bronckhorst does want to play out from the back and McLaughlin, okay, in the aftermath of yesterday, it's maybe not a great time to be saying this, but he is better at that than McGregor, and we see some of the best goalkeepers in the world with their feet. Anyone that watches the Premier League knows Alisson and Ederson make mistakes like that. Is there, yes, it's an old firm and it's put us 4-0 down, but is there going to have to be a level of acceptance that things like that could happen?
You're going to have to accept that, yeah, you will get the odd mistake when you invite a goalkeeper into being a player. Now, and as you said, you've referenced some world-class goalkeepers, which John McLaughlin is not by any
stretch. No, of course, yeah.
But they make mistakes as well. They get caught on the ball, they get pressed down, whatever, right? It happens. Maybe my particular problem with John McLaughlin's individual error on Saturday was he's not particularly pressed. It's right in front of him, and it's just stupid. Even if he'd have got the pass, it would still have been a difficult one anyway, and it wouldn't have really have moved us forward because he's putting it into a space that's right in front of the box, by and large. So it was maybe just with that one, I can't really defend him with the goalkeeper's going to goalkeep type of scenario. It's just a terrible decision. Doesn't have to do it. Not pressed into it. Doesn't have to do it. He's looked at that and when I can get this by him. I think it's Turnbull, isn't it? I can roll it by him into space and it'll be fine. And then decides to, kind of roll it to his feet, and then doesn't have the wherewithal to make the save to get out of jail either, which maybe goes back to Crawford's point about you're looking for a weight of that jersey. I think it was you who said that, Adam, actually, your quote, the weight of the jersey in terms of you can do nothing. Not that he was doing nothing that game, but Rangers goalkeepers expected to make the 92nd minute save type of scenario. John McLaughlin, he makes the error and then he compounds it by conceding the goal as well. So he doesn't get a get out of jail free card by being a goalkeeper on that one for me.
Fair enough. Yeah, gents, well, everyone can breathe a slight sigh of relief in that we have reached the end of the dissection of the game at this point. So we're going to move on to kind of wider talking points. Crawford, I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, so I'll come back to you first. What are your thoughts on the goalkeeping situation at Rangers at this minute in time? Obviously, I understand you saying that we perhaps should have signed the goalkeeper, but ultimately that the transfer window is now shut. Are you looking to change McLaughlin and bring in McGregor or even McCrory going forward? particularly with such a huge week ahead? Are you changing it, or are you willing to give McLaughlin another chance? We had a couple of comments, sorry, I should just say, saying they would stick with him, or they thought that Van Bronckhorst would stick with him. I wonder what your thoughts are.
It's a difficult one for him now, because if he drops him, his confidence is going to go. And then you're bringing McGregor in, who a lot of us didn't think we were going to keep on anyway. So it's a really difficult decision he's got for himself there. I'd probably keep McLaughlin in for Ajax. If he's a bad one against Ajax, then I think that's the decision made. You take him out for Aberdeen. So I'd probably play him for Ajax. See how he goes. If a good game over there somehow, puts a performance in, then you keep him in. But if we go over there and then it's a bad night and has a bad one again, then you've got to take him out and bring McGregor in. I don't know about McCrory. I mean, the boy never done anything wrong when he had his few games under Gerrard, but chucking him in with McGregor and McLaughlin behind him, it's a lot of pressure as well on him. So, listen, for me, the club made a mistake. They should have bought somebody. They should have got a goalkeeper in. Whether they thought they didn't want to spend the money in that position and they wanted to prioritise other areas, fine. But it is such an important position, and I don't think we've got now. We've got a goalkeeper that's anywhere near what we've had in the past. So, but yeah, in answer to your question, I'll keep McLaughlin in for the Ajax game.
Tommy, what do you then make, in hindsight, admittedly, of handing a new contract to McGregor? Because it's an interesting situation where I think, based on last season, we all knew, there was a bit of debate, but I think really we probably knew that McLaughlin was going to be the number one and McGregor was going to be number two. But, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence because of what McGregor was like domestically last season. So are you with Crawford there that we should have invested in a new goalkeeper, or do you think that McLaughlin will potentially become the keeper that Rangers need him to be?
It would be hindsight if I said that I was one of the people absolutely clamouring for a new goalkeeper, saying that was the priority position in the summer. I did think we could get through, if I was being brutally honest myself, this season, knowing that I did think McLaughlin would get the number one jersey, with the fallback being McGregor. John McLaughlin's, I don't think he'll repair himself in terms of maybe the eyes of the Rangers fans. Now, I think he probably will start against Ajax. I think Gio is the type of manager that won't throw him under the bus and kill his career at Ibrox, or he'll let him do that himself, maybe by performances. But because if you do that, you have blown him completely out of the water, and his confidence would be absolutely shot. And I think he's not old enough. Sorry, he's not young enough that you get away with it was a really bad game, and I'll take him out of the firing line. He's an experienced professional.
Yeah.
Right? That it's just purely you weren't good enough, and I've switched horses now. In which case, McGregor comes back in, and remember, McGregor's his own physicality is deteriorating as well to some extent. Back issues and stuff like that. Has to train in a certain way to get through. But with McCrory, been around the club for a long time.
Yeah.
And at what point do you make that breakthrough? Or you're not seen as being the right answer. Now, it's obvious that Gio and the team, you would like to think, sat down and went, right, it's not the priority. We can get through this season, and we'll go with John because we've seen him, a safe pair of hands, all that type of good stuff. And remember, we're throwing McLaughlin out under maybe one performance. I can't remember another performance where he's been
quite like this, yeah.
Quite that bad. And every goalkeeper, every player has terrible performances. It's unfortunate that for him that he's done it on the biggest domestic stage for Rangers, but it's not as if every single game, he's not been a bar cast, for want of a better example here. So I think he'll play against Ajax, and he'll be in the dogfight with McGregor for the rest of the season. And I don't think we'll bring in a goalkeeper until next summer. I think we need one? Yes, we need a starting goalkeeper. But do I think we'll get one anytime soon? Don't think it's in the priority plan.
Yeah. Crawford, listen, we've talked a lot about the goalkeeping situation, so let's kind of move it on slightly to, I think there's a wider discussion particularly happening in the chat at the minute about, how much this result has also reflected on the board. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that by the end of the game yesterday, there wasn't any new signings on the pitch. Now, following on from this result, how big a gap do you think it is that Rangers have to bridge? I mean, things can change, obviously, but, is there a real concern after yesterday that Rangers now really don't have the squad to go and try and win back the league title? Or is that a slight overreaction?
No, I don't think it's a overreaction at all. I think if you're a realist and you look at that yesterday, I mean, you can have a bad game. Yesterday was a bad game and, we get put to the sword. But I think even in the short period of time we've had in the season domestically, you can see that Celtic are going to blow everybody away. Aside from us, I mean, I'm saying that and yesterday doesn't really prove my point, but aside from us, I can't see anyone else taking points off them. Whereas with us, you look at Hibs, you look at going away to Aberdeen, Hearts. Can you realistically see Rangers going there and winning all those games? I don't think any of us can say that we can. So, personally for me, I think the board has got a lot to answer for because, the money that the club has brought in. And I've seen a lot of things online about, why they've maybe not spent and, UEFA looking at us and what have you. So there might be reasons for that. But the thing that annoys me is that they don't come out and tell you. If they've got a strategy, if there's a reason why they won't spend over X amount, then tell the support. We've been through so much with the club the past 10 years. We're big enough to take whatever is going on and whatever the board want to implement. So just come out and tell us, we've bought these players, that's as much as we're going to do. This is the reason why we want to try and promote youth, whatever. Just tell the fans. So personally, I think we had to buy a striker, a goalkeeper, a right winger. We did bring in Matondo. You've got to give the boy a chance to see if he's going to be the right answer. Right now, it's not looking like it. So I think the board is culpable, especially after getting Champions League. I thought we would at least bring in one, maybe like a top loan, but they never. So after yesterday, I think we're all looking at it and we're criticising them, and we should have brought somebody in.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see after this disappointment subsides, and we go a few more games and see if it turns out to be the right decision. But I don't think it is.
Yeah, Tommy, I think after yesterday's game provides probably the best chance so far to really reflect on the transfer window, because obviously the PSV result, it was easy to say that it was a smashing window. Lawrence played exceptional that night, as did Tillman and Cholak. Sands isn't a new signing, but in comparison to the kind of game time that he got from January to May, it feels like a new signing to a certain extent. What do you make of Rangers' transfer window and the squad overall after that result? Where has it left your confidence with them? I know it's only a day after, but even so.
Again, it's an interesting question because you can look at it one of two ways, and I'm not trying to fudge it. I will give you an answer, but
no, of course.
I'm trying to play devil's advocate myself in my own mind, which is this squad is so bad it qualified for the Champions League, right? But this squad is so bad it got thumped off Celtic.
Yeah.
These two things are non-exclusive. Mm-hmm. So it's performance you're looking at. Did we solve the problems is maybe the point I think I take from your question, in that did we satisfy what we wanted from everybody knew that we needed the right winger. When we brought in Matondo, doesn't seem to be the answer, but he's a young man. Maybe the question is we wanted an absolute nailed on starter in there that you pay money for. Then you look across other areas. We brought in Cholak. I think he's earned his money so far, to be honest with you. You look at Lawrence, absolute, stars, hit the ground running, bad injury. Then you look at Davies. I've not seen anything of him, yet, but was a player with pedigree, and hopefully we'll see him in there. Tillman, very, very good player, has performed extremely well, earned his money in terms of the loan by helping us in Europe. Had a terrible game on Saturday along with everybody else. The strange one is maybe Yilmaz. He paid that amount of money for a fullback, and he's been nowhere near it apart from maybe Queen of the South. So we satisfied by and large a lot of the problems that the fan base was looking for, goalkeeper aside. And now we look at it again and we say, well, actually, it's still a bit light. And I think that is because most people are in the same position as you've just referenced there. Because I was definitely in it, which is I could probably live with that squad. I'm not going to change my mind and pretend that I thought differently just because we've had a bad defeat and I want to sound like I knew more than I did. I thought that was a squad that could do a job. When we qualified for the Champions League, I did expect us to go back in and bring in some one or two top quality players because we had that access to that money, and you can sell that to players. well, by the way, Champions League now, come on board.
Yeah.
And we'll get a 2-year pedigree, if you like, from a sustainable. Well, you can take it back further, but I just mean you can say Champions League group stages, and by the way, we're in the Europa League final last season. As a club that's transitioning through a really good period, but we didn't, and some of that might be dependent on players knocking us back, other transfers not happening that unlock those types of things. You can't always be in control of that, and it's not all about just upping the money. That's unsustainable. We know this, right? So I do think we're light now, because I thought we would bring in some other quality starters, and you look at some of the players that are in there, and they're squad players, or they're not performing particularly well, and we haven't solved some conundrums. What really maybe gets my ire up, and maybe some other fans in the chats, etc. as well, is you've got Gio turning around and saying, well, I think this squad is absolutely good enough and I don't need to make any changes. And I didn't need to make any changes to it. But how then do you defend the 4-0 thumping?
Yeah. Can I ask the question though, Tommy, would it have been helpful if Van Bronckhorst came out and said the squad isn't good enough? I'm not suggesting that's what you mean he should have said, but I suppose the opposite end of the spectrum of that is for him to be slightly more public about the fact that the squad perhaps isn't good enough. Now, listen, maybe Giovanni Van Bronckhorst in his own head does believe that the squad is good enough. I'm not going to say that the guy's lying, but what do you feel in that case he kind of should be saying?
I think that's the last resort of a manager
to
attack his own team publicly. That's the grenade. And then you've also got are you also meaning, does he attack the board and say, I did want more players, they didn't give me that? And that's not what I hear from the club, by the way. There was funds, and the club have always been quite clear about case by case basis. There was money there to go and buy stuff, is what I'm led to believe. And Gio genuinely didn't want anybody. Make of that what you will. I don't think that works greatly either. We're seeing Brendan Rodgers at Leicester having a pop at his board. We're seeing
well, is it? Yeah.
Scott Parker at Bournemouth the other day, who did it and then was relieved of his duties fairly quickly. If you're going to do that, there has to be one, real problems, and I'm not entirely convinced that I ever like Rangers airing their problems in public. And then two, you have to be aware of what the consequences will be, because the upshot of that is your manager probably ends up leaving because the board can't back him, or the players don't respect him, or he leaves because he doesn't feel like he's getting the backing and won't see his reputation go down. And Gio's got a good rep, did well in Holland, he's come across, he's got a European final, didn't win it, but he's got a European final in his back pocket, and he won a domestic trophy as well. So I wouldn't like to see that. I think we're in a space whereby nobody at the club's going to come out and say, by the way, this is exactly who we went after, and that didn't work. They have been quite clear about what the model is, and it's use model, framework, whatever phrase you want, but we're going to try and buy some good players if they come available at a certain age, particularly ones that we can develop and sell on, right? Highlight being Calvin Bassey, obviously, right? Yeah. Some of that might change. We went to a slightly older age range for Cholak because he had to come in at the top end of the park as a kind of already pre-made striker to give us something, right? So he's not the most saleable asset. What else do you want the club to say? And I'm not defending the club there to any great degree, by the way. I do think some of their communications are terrible.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
The manager's not going to come out at this stage and throw his team under the bus. The question is, having done it twice, this type of result at Celtic Park, was it the right time for it? I would like to think that that's happened in-house, but if I saw that type of performance again, I would expect Gio to be slightly more abrasive about the team in his post-match conversations.
Yeah. Crawford, I'm just wondering where you think, or for yourself, where this leaves Gio slightly in terms of your mind. I'm not for any minute suggesting that he should be even considered getting sacked at this moment in time for me personally. But as Tommy mentioned there, he's obviously got the credit from Europe. And I also think that the Scottish Cup deserves slightly more credit than it gets, given Rangers' Cup record prior to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst coming in. I mean, they didn't exactly smash that ceiling under Steven Gerrard either. Where does it leave him for you?
Well, I think yesterday I was overreacting, and a few beers in me, and I wanted him gone because we'd lost.
You were the only one.
But no, I mean, you've got to, once the dust settles and you can look back on it, it was a bad day. We've had loads of bad days following Rangers, so you just take it. But I think he does have credit in the bank. You know, we can't forget what he did last year. the main issue I've got with him is domestically. And I think it is a concern, especially going away from Ibrox. He needs to get that sorted. It's all well and good doing, well in Europe. We all love it, but we need to sort out the domestic form, and it's an issue for him. He's got to figure out how to navigate it better than what he is, and we need to start being more ruthless, because he's obviously got a style of play, which is, it's cultured, it's pass, and it works to an extent in Europe. It works well in Europe, but I don't think at home it needs to be that way. I think you can go one less defensive midfielder in the centre, and play two attacking midfielders in there, go after teams. I think he's got to do more of that. We've got to follow Celtic's blueprint to an extent in that way. We've got quality players. There's no team in this league that should be able to live with us. So, go out and play that way. Go and get the game done. Get goals. Don't be afraid. He needs to change it. But, your point, your question, yeah, he's got credit in the bank. Yeah, there's no way I'd be looking for him to lose his job or get rid of him now.
Yeah.
Just one thing to add to that.
Yeah, please tell me.
Because it's a good example of what Crawford's saying. So one of the things I think was completely missing about Saturday was our intent at the top of the park, right? So again, to reference Celtic, really dynamic, really, really quick to move the ball forward. And that was always the intent. Get it forward. Rangers slightly plodding, happy to put it about the midfield constantly, stopping some attacks when we go into good areas to bring it back and all that type of thing. That's why you end up with more possession than Celtic in that game, but off the back of a 4-0 defeat. I'm pretty sure I'll give up the possession stats if the philosophy becomes a little bit more about, right, base yourself 10 yards further and let's start pushing teams and actually just go at them, as opposed to trying to drift it across and make space all the time in terms of that, pulling people out of position. And I know that's part of the game, I'm not walking past it, but you look at the difference in terms of dynamic attacks and being willing to play those killer balls. That was a key point, and it's a key point in all of Gio's away games. And I think you referenced the stat earlier on, and I'm not walking past that. I want to get back to it for a reason, which is, to Crawford's point, if that away form continues domestically, it won't be Gio's choice about where he goes next, because it'll be taken out of his hands, because that's form that doesn't get you anywhere near winning a league. And this is Gio's season to have that crack, because he's been backed and it's a good squad. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were all very much on that page.
No, yes, no, I do understand that. No, I do completely get where you're coming from. It's an odd problem to have as a manager. I can't imagine there's many that beat Borussia Dortmund 4-2 away from home and then struggle going to Livingston. I can't imagine any of us thought that would be the issue with Giovanni van Bronckhorst. Crawford, I want to just come back to you there, because I think Tommy's kind of quite nicely picked up on it. Is there a worry that ultimately, fundamentally, Van Bronckhorst's style of football there and perhaps, how much time are you willing to give him? I know Tommy mentioned if those away performances continue, but obviously I think it's quite an interesting season because we have this World Cup break in the middle. Now, I'm not suggesting that when the World Cup comes, it's a sort of do or die moment for Giovanni van Bronckhorst, but fundamentally, do you feel that is something that's going to change? Because he has been in charge quite a while now, and I don't necessarily know if he's going to change that.
That's where he's going to, he's either going to live or die on that. If he's got to recognise that. I don't know how well he takes on board criticism, but surely himself, when he does analysis of the games that we drop points in, you can see that the way the style domestically doesn't work. It works okay at Ibrox, but away from home, I think he's got this tendency to play one too many in the midfield that are more defensive minded. I think we don't think we need to do that. I think we've got far better players than the rest of the teams in the league. Out with Celtic, but I think we're pretty even with. But if you've got it, then go and use it. Go and win the game. Play attacking football. I think the fans will be far more forgiving if you lose a game, but you went out and you've actually tried to really go after a team, rather than you're 1-0 up, 2-1 up, and you're still passing and try to control the game, and then there's an error somewhere and we end up drawing a game or chucking it. And that's the reason why Celtic play the way they play, because they go out, they think, right, if we get this game killed at half time, then the second half's a breeze. And there's an element as well, I think Van Bronckhorst needs to realise that if you play that way and you can get the games killed early, then ultimately it helps in Europe as well, because you can start taking players off, use the squad more. If you're sitting at 1-0, 2-0 in 70, 80 minutes, you don't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. So I think he needs to realise it and needs to start changing his style. Otherwise, if the league goes, then I think his job goes with it.
Tommy, what do you think that's down to? Do you think it's, we kind of mentioned Matondo earlier, for example. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily he should have started yesterday specifically, but it doesn't necessarily reflect brilliantly on the squad if he's not quite changed that yet. Do you think it's because he doesn't have the faith that if he does stick, say, 4 attackers, that he rotates quite often in those games, that they're maybe not necessarily going to go out and win 3 or 4-0? So he thinks, well, I'd rather spread the quality around, even if it may, on paper, appear slightly more defensive, than go all-out attack with what looks like a weaker side.
Yeah, before I answer that question, I maybe pick you up on something you just said there. If you say Matondo maybe shouldn't start on Saturday, my question would be why?
I do agree. I just mean, kind of in generally, obviously, he hasn't started a huge amount, and I can understand why perhaps yesterday was not the game to throw him into. I mean, we've seen that with Diallo a few months ago. I do appreciate what you're saying, that his pace and it might have made a difference. I would argue that Arfield would have made more of a difference, to be honest. I think there's a number of players that could have potentially started. I don't know necessarily if Matondo was going to be the answer. Maybe that's slightly harsh on my part. Crawford mentioned earlier that we do need to give him a bit more time. I personally didn't think I'd seen enough from him to warrant him starting an Old Firm.
Yeah, no, listen, I'm with you on that. I've not seen enough of him either, but every player deserves a run at some point in time. But the point I was making was more about, so he was one of those, I think it was 2.3 somewhere in there.
I think that was around about the figure quoted, yeah.
So given what we were spending in the summer, he was signed to solve the right wing equation and be a starter. So it just links back to some of those problems we've got in terms of building the squad as well, because not only did he not start, he couldn't get ahead of Scott Wright to come on. And you could say things about shape and being able to tuck inside in the way that Gio sometimes likes it to go narrow, etc., etc. I'm not going to go down the tactics route at this time. But yeah, I think Gio maybe is worried, or rather he comes from a place where it's domination of the ball. And so you want to make sure you've got that midfield structure that allows you to get forward what should be rapidly, but also be very protective of anybody cutting through. The problem we've got right now is we don't get forward rapidly and we're leaking goals, or rather we did on Saturday. And so you don't see any of the benefit. Really, the wider problem maybe on Saturday was our fullbacks were pinned back for most of the game, particularly Tav. Bonner, when he did get forward, I think Crawford said, put in some really good...
I did put it,
yeah. I mean, Cholak should at least hit the target with that clear cut one, right? When it was 1-0 at that point in time. But yeah, we're getting nothing out of that. So Gio either has to say, right, what's making that happen? Is it the style of play, i.e. I need to give them slightly more license to be able to go further forward? I need to change the players that I'm putting into the first team. Given Lawrence is out injured, etc. Arfield's maybe your only, you don't have Hagi, you don't have Lawrence, so you've got a Tillman Arfield type of equation in there with Kamara and Jack coming back to full fitness, Davis, that type of thing. Lowry when he comes back as well. Or are you saying I need to play like that because I don't believe out with of Lawrence and Tillman I've got the quality to play the style that I really want to? And if he's saying that at this point in time, then that's a structural problem, because you had all summer to buy in slightly more players to be able to pad that out. Solve for X, so to speak, is that formula. And right now, Gio sticks with what he knows, which is I like my teams to have a fairly, not static midfield, but I like them to be protective, and I like us to go wide for our attacking features as opposed to playing directly through. I don't see him changing that in the short term.
Yeah, I suppose it remains to be seen. Guys, we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to kind of pick up on something that I had seen. I thought it was just a kind of interesting point of discussion. Crawford, I'll come to you with it first. So Daryl Curry had put out a tweet basically suggesting that he didn't feel that under Steven Gerrard, Rangers would have lost Old Firms in the manner that they have at Parkhead. Now, we've had a few comments come in about how Van Bronckhorst in post-match perhaps could have been a bit more emotional. I would counter perhaps suggestions or the implication of Daryl Curry's tweet that he isn't hard enough with the actions that he's shown with Morelos these past couple of weeks before, a huge game against PSV. And there is obviously, we have to caveat all this with the different teams that Gerrard's playing, etc. But what do you make of that? Do you think there is a slight difference there with Van Bronckhorst, that I don't know, they're just a bit more susceptible to heavier defeats?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult one because he's obviously a totally different character to Gerrard. I think maybe we wouldn't have lost that game in the manner we did under Gerrard, because is it just his manner? He maybe comes a lot more aggressive, probably more aggressive with the players, maybe more passionate. So would that make a difference? I don't know. Van Bronckhorst is obviously, he's quite a calm guy. That has its benefits as well, because he doesn't get sucked into the emotion of the game. He can stand back and analyse things and all that good stuff. So it's horses for courses, I think, with that. Either you're picking that manager for a reason, and probably one of the reasons we do well in Europe, because he can analyse games and he is calm. But then sometimes you do just need a rocket. You need to, in that dressing room, and you need your manager to be, to be aggressive and tell players that it's not acceptable. And while Gio does that, I'm not entirely sure. He seems to be quite friendly with the players, and that kind of management style. So it's a tough one. I think there's probably something in it, but at the same time, the game's moved on, and the players actually react to that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Tommy, I'm wondering what your thoughts on it are, and I would also again like just counter it by saying that I think Crawford picked up on it really nicely there, that, in a world where Steven Gerrard is still in charge, Rangers, in my opinion, do not reach the Europa League final, and in turn, more than likely don't reach the Champions League group stage. I just think there maybe is a wee bit of a discussion to be had there about, do you think that change of management has resulted in these losses potentially becoming they have become a bit heavier, haven't
they? Yeah, I think it's less to do with the personalities and more with the setups and the players, in all honesty. And I'll always give somebody a little bit of leeway in terms of how they come across post-match, etc., talking when they're speaking in a second language, which isn't their native one.
Yeah, of course.
It's Gio trying to get things across in English, although is that a problem in the dressing room? One would hope not. But referencing the clip that you saw or you mentioned earlier on, Gio's going crazy on the touchline. So there's definitely some frustration and passion there. It's not as if he's just binary all nicey. But yeah, you do sometimes want to see more of that. Do I think that the beating that we took on Saturday, and it was beating unfortunately, would have happened under Gerrard? It's a really tough one. I don't think the players would have maybe capitulated the way they did, some of the senior players. Or rather, maybe Gerrard, McBeal, etc., Tom Culshaw got more out of some of those senior players. That said, I'm with you, Adam. I don't see Gerrard's style of play getting us to the Europa League final, winning the Scottish Cup, and or qualifying for the Champions League against some top opposition across maybe two of those things that I've mentioned. There are three of those things in terms of that. So we could chop that up all night.
Of course,
different answers, but I do think there's maybe a slight mentality shift in terms of how we go about things in the game, and maybe the reluctance to get into the trenches and do some of the dirtier stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you picked up on it there. I mean, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst beat better teams than Slavia Prague the first time in the last 16 under Gerrard. Who was it? The first was Bayer Leverkusen. So
Leverkusen the first time.
So Giovanni Van Bronckhorst beat better teams with the same players. So it is just a kind of different approach in management, lads. We're just about to wrap up, but I just kind of want to ask one final question. Tommy, I'll come to you first. Where's your kind of head coming into this huge week? What do you think it's going to be like? I know that Rangers have got a huge game, away to Ajax on Wednesday night, and then another big domestic game away to Aberdeen. What do you see happening this week?
Well, nothing would surprise me. I think, and strangely, the Ajax game is probably a good fit for us because it will be a really kind of tactical battle. It will be more the style of play that Van Bronckhorst is used to and the team are set up for. So I genuinely think we could get something out there. And then we need to take whatever happens to that and put it all to one side and roll our sleeves up, because it's going to be the exact opposite of free-flowing football when we go up to Pittodrie. I think it's a 12 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, whatever. That's going to be similar, lesser calibre of players, but similar to the start that we probably got at Parkhead, in that they'll try and come out the traps, try and press us hard, try and make us make mistakes and go off our game. So it's from footballing heaven to long ball hell, I would imagine, on Saturday.
I think that's the title of the podcast next week. That's quite a nice one there. Crawford, I mean, it sounds crazy to say when you say out loud that they could feasibly get beat 4-0 and then go and beat Ajax or get a result in Amsterdam. But I do completely understand what Tommy is saying. It wouldn't really, in a strange way, surprise me if Rangers did get a result. Similar question to you. What do you see happening in this another huge week?
Going off Saturday, I can't really see anything other than, a defeat. If I'm being honest, I know that's quite pessimistic, negative, but that's just my headspace right now after Saturday. So, listen, could we go over there and get a result? Yes, based on what we've done in Europe, we could. Do I think we'll do it? No, but I've been wrong a million times with Rangers, so hopefully I'm wrong again. And we go over and we do it. But, put that game aside on Saturday, just try and start again, try and build up some momentum. I think Tommy's right. Aberdeen's going to be massive because we need to get that sorted and start putting a run together like Celtic are on if we've got any chance. So big week, and it's just how the players respond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, remains to be seen. Everyone, I think that's a good place to wrap things.
Oh, sorry, Adam. I know we're over time, but no host escapes without a question. So you've asked us a question: what's going to happen on Wednesday? What do you think?
I think back to, and I'm not comparing Hearts and Ajax for anyone that's just tuning in, but they did get a reaction last time they lost to Celtic. Ajax will be a very tough game. Do I think Van Bronckhorst has it in him to get a result? Yes. And I'll be optimistic and say I think they'll get a draw against Ajax. Aberdeen have been odd, slightly up and down. So it's always a difficult game. I think regardless of Aberdeen's form, Aberdeen could have lost 6 in a row and we'd be saying that going up to Pittodrie is a difficult game. We know that it is a hard place to go to. But roundabout way of saying, I think they'll win. I think they will beat Aberdeen on Saturday. I'll try and be optimistic. No disrespect, Crawford, but we'll end it on